Welcome, everyone. My name is Jim McKey, and I'm the practice area leader for independent schools at GG+A. Thanks for bearing with us today. We're actually having a little bit of technical difficulty. Our guest speaker, Jack Rogers, reported a thunderstorm in Philadelphia that's knocked out his power, but he's able to join us via phone. Jack, are you there?
Jim, I'm here and ready to go.
Okay, thank you. We know that these are troubling times in our country, and we hope that all of you are safe and that your communities are finding ways of having dialogues around important issues facing your organization, your communities, our country, and the world. Now, as we get started, let me remind you that our conversation with John T. Rogers, also called Jack, of Penn Charter will go approximately 30 minutes until 12:30 Central Time. We warmly welcome questions for Jack from any of our listeners. Unfortunately, we won't be able to take those questions live on the air, but we would ask you to please direct them to the QA button at the bottom of your screen. Jack has graciously agreed to address any questions sent in. It may take a few days, but we will publish on our website both your questions and Jack's answers. In addition, as part of our efforts to continually improve these webinars, we are keen to get your input on current and future topics. Please visit the chat room at the bottom of your screen to link to this 1-minute survey. We really appreciate your input. And let me remind you, you are all on mute. Our webinar today is focused on how one school has chosen its path over the last few months during the pandemic. Penn Charter is the 5th oldest school in America and the oldest Quaker school in the world. William Penn and the Religious Society of Friends established the school in 1689. Today, Penn Charter enrolls 975 boys and girls, pre-K to grade 12, on a green campus in the East Falls neighborhood of Philadelphia. Quaker values remain at the heart of everything the school does and expects of its students, including what's taught, how it's taught, students' behavior, and their relationships with one another. Through a loving and supporting school community, students grow as intellectual, emotional, social, and moral beings. I would just note that on Penn Charter's website today, there is a powerful statement from head of school, Dr. Darryl Ford, about the times we are in and how Penn Charter is reflecting and acting. It's my honor to introduce you to John T. Rogers. Jack is the Chief Advancement Officer at Penn Charter. You saw in his bio that he includes experiences as a teacher, an attorney, a head of school, and a development leader. He is also an active volunteer with professional organizations. Jack is leading a campaign at Penn Charter that is in its public phase and is already over its $75 million goal, having raised nearly $83 million. It is a comprehensive campaign for endowment for scholarships, some program investments, a new athletics and wellness center, a new lower school, and annual operating support. You will hear more from Jack about Penn Charter's plans. GG+A has been working with Penn Charter since the days of planning its campaign in 2012. Jack, let me start with the first question. On March 12th, Penn Charter had its Giving Day called It's a Great Day to be a Quaker, scheduled to go with lots of on-campus activity and well-orchestrated communication. Earlier that week, the school announced it would be closing the campus on March 13th. While many other schools were canceling their days, you decided to go ahead with yours. How and why did you decide that, and what were the results?
Well, Jim, let me start with the why. Why do we continue to raise money, and why do we go forward with our great day to be a Quaker? Our duty as fundraisers is to do our job. The development team decided that the kids were in school, the teachers were teaching, and we had a day that was listed, but we had to change it. So our how. had to be looked at very carefully. We did not want the perception to go out to our community that Darryl Ford, head of school, or our teachers or our students would be distracted in a day of giving when it was their last day they would be in classes on campus. So what we did was we made the development office the face of this effort. We started the day with a video from the development office basically saying that the needs of the school need to be met each and every day. And we put out our goals for that day. We had various matches that we wanted to meet throughout the day. And then we also said that we would extend meeting these matches to the end of May. We went forward with the day of giving, and we kept it somber. There were no activities on campus. Usually kids get involved. There's a photo booth. You know, we have a great team at Penn Charter that engages parents, faculty, staff, and our students most of all. None of that happened that day. At the end of the day, we gave our report out, and we were worried that how would this land? That was our fear. Well, I'm proud to say that we are able to say that we raised over $400,000, and we had a little over 400 donors. And what this did for us is when we started working remotely, we had 400 donors that we were able to thank in the initial days of the remote working from our homes. If we hadn't done that, where would our annual fund be today? Right now, our annual fund is tracking towards a goal of $1.6 million, and we have every belief that we're not only going to meet that goal, we're going to exceed it. But if we had not had the day of giving, we would not be where we are today.
Thanks, Jack. Let me ask you about your own work. And I know that you are a very external chief development officer. You travel all over the country, often with the head of school. How have you adjusted your own work to stay connected with your top prospects in times like these?
Jim, if you had asked me this question 3 months ago, you would have gotten a different answer. I can give you an answer now based on 3 months of this type of work. From the start of the campaign, GG+A looked at our office, and the recommendation came back to us that I needed to be on the road as much as I could. Any time spent in the office was not the best use of my time. And also, Darryl Ford had to be actively engaged in the external work of the campaign. Fortunate for Penn Charter, Associate Director Stephanie Ball was going into her 8th or 9th year at Penn Charter, had deep relationships, and had the ability to manage the team. Stephanie Ball managed the team internally, and then in recent years, Stephanie Ball and Nicole Martz managed the team. So we had 2 professionals internally working on data, working on events, working on the annual fund. My main goal was to be out and seeing people, and the goal was to not have any distractions. So I have connected, believe it or not, more deeply with our top prospects in the last 3 months. I find people are home, they're taking my calls, and they are really anxious to hear about the school. So here's the game plan that Darryl Ford and I put together. From March until mid-April, our plan was to check in on our top prospects, to check in with them first, see how they were doing, how their family was doing, and then what was on their mind. Just be good listeners. In April through May, we started reaching out again, and the check-in was quick. How are you doing? How's your family? Then we started using the time to update them. And they were really feeling great about hearing how Penn Charter was doing and how is the distance learning working. And for many of our major donors, they're alumni and they're 50 to 60 years out. They have grandchildren that are going through distance learning. So they wanted to hear all about Penn Charter and what Penn Charter was doing. Now we're in the month of June, and now we're doing our gift work. But that gift work was laid on the foundation of checking in, updating, and now we're doing the work. Also, where we are right now, we know what our needs are for next year, and we're able to articulate them. But there's no way that you can replace face-to-face visits. And I have to tell you, for me, it's been hard. I'm a man that goes off the energy of others. And it's hard for me to get myself up when I'm not across from someone, you know, at the top of a mountain in the Berkshires or down at the southern tip of Florida, you know, or out on a ranch in Texas. You know, it's hard to bring that to a call on the phone. But you know what? It can happen. It's harder work because you have to really deep down and really talk to someone. I'll give you one example of a donor who I have had 13 years of really great visits with. And I really wanted to engage him. And we were going to do a Quaker meeting. And I thought it would be great engagement for me to call him and ask him if he would speak at that Quaker meeting. He agreed to do it. We had the Quaker meeting. And when he got up at the meeting, he talked about his relationship with the school. And he surprised me by saying it's the first time he ever spoke in a Friends meeting. And he was a lifer at the William Penn Charter School. After that meeting, we talked about his life. We talked about the honor it was for him to speak. And our relationship grew by leaps and bounds. And I never thought that relationship could get any better. I'll talk about him a little bit later in this conversation we're having.
Jack, you mentioned that Darryl Ford has been a very active partner in fundraising. How has your current situation changed the way you work with your head of school, and how have you been able to use him?
Well, Darryl Ford and I started together in our roles as Chief Development Officer and Head of School on July 1st, 2007. That was a momentous day for both of us. Darryl was former head of the middle school. He's a lifelong Philadelphian. He knew the city, he knew our donors, he knew our kids. It was a great day for Penn Charter. I was fortunate enough to have my mentor, Bruce Began, tell me that I should develop a list of 20 donors and have Darryl call those 20 donors on his first day in the office of head of school. That was our start. Darryl made those calls. And when this crisis happened, Darryl, the man he is, he called me up because we were distant at the time, and he said, Jack, I have to tell you something that's really hard for me, but I have to state this, and you have to help me carry out what I need to do, and then look for ways that you can help me to get more involved in development as we move forward. He said to me, I have to get remote learning right for Penn Charter. We have to take care of our students, our teachers and staff, and our parents. That must be our focus. There's nothing else. With that said, Darryl Ford said to me, Jack, use me wisely. I don't want to say no to the work and development because I know what we have in front of us. But please understand that my time will be limited. and in the events of the past 10 days have even drained more on the head's office. And I would encourage you to go to our website and look at the letter from Darryl Ford. It is a letter that speaks of the man and of the role he plays in our community.
Jack, before it was in late February, you were discussing plans with your campaign leaders that you would announce that you exceeded your goal, but that you plan to keep going to fully accomplish the goals of the campaign. How have your plans changed as a result of the COVID-19 environment? And did you choose to set up a specific fund or change your fundraising priorities?
Jim, that is a great question. I will start in March. Our board meeting in March is the next to last board meeting of the year for our overseers. And working with Darryl and working with the development team, we sent a memo to the board outlining that our goal of $75 million was exceeded, and we should celebrate that. But in order to build 2 buildings and to get our endowment over $100 million, a goal of 75, no matter how well you do getting past it, you've got to go way past it to build 2 buildings and get an endowment to over $100 million. So we laid out a plan for our overseers to consider in March, with the hope that in May, when they came back together again, we would be able to announce, and we wanted to announce this right after the board meeting to our faculty and staff. We have a dinner that evening every year to celebrate the year. And Darryl and the clerk of the board, Jeff Reinhold, wanted to be able to announce the goal plans first to our faculty and staff. And we had hoped to announce that we were at $92 million. We had gifts lined up to announce that. And then to say that our new goal was well over $100 million. And basically, on the back of the paper, the overseers closest to us knew that we needed about $125 million. So here we are in March. That fell through. We have families that are struggling because of the job situation. They're struggling at distance learning at home. You know, we had to take that campaign idea and just put it off to the side for a moment. And what we did is we said, well, what do we know that we have to do right away? And that's the annual fund. So what we decided to do was we decided to focus on the annual fund and making sure we are going to reach the annual fund goal. A lot of schools were talking about COVID funds. We were getting calls from alumni about their colleges having COVID funds. And we wanted to be patient. So what we did was we started to think about how we could talk to our closest donors about some sort of special fund. But we also wanted our general public to know that the annual fund was where we really wanted to go. So we did 2 tracks. The office and the staff and sort of the internal people worked on annual fund, following up on events. We did some remote events. We had a reunion weekend we had to reschedule. We had a golf outing we had to reschedule a couple times. And my thoughts were on how do we think about this special fund? How do we think about announcing the new goal? And how do we make this all work together? So here's where we are as to our goal. We're of the opinion that no one wants to hear about an increased goal if they don't know whether we're going back to school in the fall. But we thought we have to come out and talk about this. So our best thinking right now, the board has approved an extension of the campaign for an additional year. So we're going to have 2 years left. We're going into the last 2 years of the campaign. You should know that we went public in October of 2017. So it's not too long. It's not, and we've had no donor fatigue. No donor fatigue. So our plan is in the fall. We're going to give an update of our success. We have a building going up that's going to have a lot of energy around it. And we're going to say to people that we're still continuing to get that goal of the endowment over 100 million and also to build the second building. And there will be some pause in our talk about the second building, because we can't be talking about a second building if we can't meet the needs of our families right now to stay at our school. So I guess it was in April, I went to Darryl Ford, and I'd been quiet. I had been laying low. And I said, Darryl, we have an idea from the development office, and Jim McKey was right there with us, of having a leadership call with our closest investors in our school. And for us, that is mainly alumni. We sent out an invitation to 45 people. Every one of those people accepted the invitation. We also, through the leadership of 2 overseers, the co-chairs of the campaign, we developed a slide deck of about 12 slides laying out enrollment, remote learning, the financial challenges we had ahead of us. And that was a 12-slide deck. And then we presented it to Darryl, and he really had to do it at night after he got off the computer for the schoolhouse. And for 1 solid week, he gave us 4 hours of preparation in the evening. We decided we would have him speak from the overseer's room at the school. Darryl only lives right off campus. So I came in with him. We set the room up, and Darryl, who is a master at presenting stuff, he was able to say, I'm talking to you from the overseer's room, where all the major decisions have been made for our school since 1925. Darryl also got a little bit lucky. The day we gave this was the day that the governor of Pennsylvania said we could go back and do construction on the Athletic and Wellness Center. So Darryl was able to go over to a window and talk out to the window, and he was videotaped on this call. And Darryl was able, in that call, to set out for everyone our best thinking of our needs and what we needed to do to go forward. But it wasn't settled at that time. We said to those donors that in the next 3 weeks, we would be contacting them for their ideas, their responses to what Darryl said. We also had questions that were prepared earlier that came from our attendees, because they got the deck 2 days before, and they were able to ask Darryl additional questions during the call, because that's the way Darryl likes to talk. He likes to engage people. Where are we today? Well, we have put together an idea to save our community. We're calling it the Preservation Fund. And it has 2 goals. It has goals to keep every one of our families at Penn Charter, regardless of their financial ability to pay, and to support every faculty and staff person. We started raising money aggressively for that last Friday. I sit here now talking to you, and I'm able to announce that our Board of Overseers has pledged over $500,000, and we have every expectation to be over $1 million by the end of Friday. And Darryl hopes to announce that to our families that our most trusted investors in the school have stepped forward to support our families and our faculty and staff through the challenges we have.
Jack, let me ask you a last question. Penn Charter has always been a leader in alumni giving. Of your 10 gifts of $1 million or more, 7 come from alumni. Over half of your donors to the campaign have been alumni. What do you do specifically at Penn Charter to promote alumni engagement and giving to the school?
Jim, that's really a great question. And when you talk about financial support at Penn Charter, alumni is where you need to start. Penn Charter alumni to this current campaign, we have 10 donors of over $1 million and more. And of those 10 donors, 7 of them are alumni. We are talking about $40 million, and 7 of the donors to that $40 million are alumni. And when we look at our annual fund each year, we're a school of 975 students. 40% of our students are on aid of some level. 65% of our annual fund dollars come from alumni. So why is that? Well, I can speak to a few points. The first point I'd like to speak to is the work of development officers that came before me. We established a reunion program almost at the beginning of development work in independent schools. We're talking late 50s, early 60s. Reunion programs started developing throughout the country. Penn Charter had an alumni society dating back to 1934. But in the 50s and the 60s, that alumni society became part of the Penn Charter development program. And it started with class agents. Penn Charter had a 75th reunion program last year where the class agent had been doing that work for 75 years. Think about that, some form or another. Now we celebrate our reunion weekend every May, and at that reunion weekend, we invite all the classes back to a Friday night event, and all of our graduates that are past their 50th reunion get to come for free. We give out awards that night. We usually give out an award for long-time devotion to the school, 1689, and we give out the Alumni Award of Merit. So we have an Alumni Award of Merit has been given out at Penn Charter for almost 7 decades. Some of the people that have received it are Nobel Prize winners, great athletes. This particular year coming up, which we were not able to celebrate it in May, we're going to do it in the fall, because we didn't want this year to go by. We didn't want it to be remote, so we're holding out that we can do it in the fall. And this year it's going to be the former chief financial officer of Microsoft, who was a boy whose mother taught at Penn Charter, and now he's a leader on many boards throughout the country. So we have this special thing about being a Penn Charter graduate. We even have a little thing we put after their name. It's OPC, Old Penn Charter. And people want to have those initials after their name. I'll also tell you that in our last campaign, which ended in 2006, the current chief development officer at that time was Bruce Began, who came from Williams College. And Bruce brought to Penn Charter the 50th reunion program that they used at Williams and the planned giving program, and he adapted that to Penn Charter. Currently, Chris Rahill is our alumni director. He's a graduate of the school. He was a scholarship student, and Chris has taken that program and put his own mark on that program. And Chris has really pushed reunion giving. I was on a call with Chris today, and his comment to me was, I have all the class agents going at their particular classes, but I'd like to send a general email out to all of our alumni, and especially the reunion classes, that this is a time more than ever that we need to support Old Penn Charter.
Jack, thank you very much for being a part of this discussion today. I'm sure our audience really appreciates your insights. Again, I want to remind everyone to submit their questions at the QA button below and to complete a very short survey in the chat box. We here at GG+A want to thank all of you for being with us today and trust that this was a helpful session for your work. We will post a recording of today's webinar early next week. Please stay tuned for additional content and webinars as we continue our series, Fundraising in a Public Health Crisis. Thank you very much.